Hey there, Three Rivers. Hope you guys are doing well. Just want to share some cool stuff with you, some thoughts, and a really amazing opportunity that is in front of us right now. Not being able to gather has forced us to really emphasize the scattering of the local church and the fact that our cells, our small groups, our at Three Rivers Church, we call them our radical life groups, are still the local church gathered. And the church is still the church of Jesus Christ. And so I've been asking this question. I've asked you to ask this question. What does the Lord want us to learn from this? The answer to that is massive. There are many things the Lord wants us to learn from this. One of those is that the church scattered is still the church. I'm going to give you a few things the church is not, okay? Because I want us to take this opportunity to shift the framework of how we see the local church. The church is not a nonprofit organization. So when you think church, don't think starting a nonprofit or getting nonprofit status. The church is not a nonprofit. It's not a 501c3. The church in the Bible is not started by pastors or professional ministry people. That's not what the church is. The church is not a place. Those are things the church is not. But let me share with you what the church is. The church is the called out people of Jesus Christ. The church is the called out people who've been called from death to life through faith in Jesus Christ. The church is gathered. There's a biblical command to gather. Doesn't tell us how many times, doesn't tell us how often. We learn in Acts that every day they gathered in the temple courts and then from house to house. Hebrews 10:25 tells us to not forsake gathering together. So it's gathered, but the church is also scattered on mission. So the local church is scattered to complete the Great Commission. So the church is gathered and the church is scattered. The church is on mission. In other words, the church exists to complete Jesus' mission of discipling the nations. The church, scattered and gathered, observes then everything Jesus taught us to observe. And the church does it the way Jesus taught us to do it. So Jesus taught us what to do, and he taught us how to do it. And then he taught us to do it in a manner applied to where we are. And here's the reality. I say this a lot, and I mean this, and I want you to hear this. Every disciple, every follower of Jesus Christ is a church planter. Now, it's important that you understand what that means. It doesn't mean a 501c3 starter. It doesn't mean a seminary graduate. It doesn't mean a pastor. It means every disciple is a church planter, meaning every disciple is a disciple maker. Because here's what happens. The church is made up of people who've been called from death to life through the preached gospel and been made a disciple of Jesus Christ by believing on Christ. And then by believing on Christ, they become a new creature and they begin to gather together and they begin to make more disciples and more disciples and more disciples. And that's the process that happened in the New Testament. Biblical church government happened after churches were planted. And elders, overseers were established after the fact. It was disciples who planted churches. So we really believe every disciple is a church planter. We have this glorious opportunity in front of us now to not see church as a Sunday morning service alone of gathered, but as cells, small groups of disciples making disciples, multiplying, and everyone exercising their gift to be on mission with Jesus. The church shows up in the world in three ways. The universal church, every follower of Jesus, that we're related to one another in Christ. That's what's called the universal church. Then there's the local church. That universal church manifested in a city of a group of people covenanted together, meaning they're accountable to one another and accountable to some biblical form of church government. And then that church manifests itself in smaller gatherings. We call them sometimes Sunday school classes. At our church, we call them radical life groups. Some churches call them cells. Some churches call them life groups or small groups, but it's still the local church gathered on mission together. And how do we make more of those? By making more disciples, by preaching the gospel, leading people to faith in Jesus Christ, and integrating them into the life of the church. And at that level, every single disciple is a church planter because the cell is still the local church. And by multiplying and starting a fellowship of believers who are repenting by faith and following Jesus Christ, you have the church still functioning. The church begins in all new places where the gospel's pioneering as cells. So how do we advance the glory of God by discipling the nations? That's our particular vision here at our church. How do we advance the glory of God by discipling the nations? And here's the answer: by training every single member of the fellowship to be a church planter. By making disciples who make disciples who make disciples in covenant fellowship with one another on mission, connected to the universal church. And so Three Rivers, and anybody who happens to hear this, if you want to learn that, we teach people, professional ministry people, this stuff, and I want to teach all of us to multiply churches. So here's the deal. If you want to learn that, I want to invite you to be part of that. We're going to begin on May the 7th. May the 6th. That's a Wednesday. And we're going to start at 7 p.m. May the 6th, 7 p.m. And we're going to do it by Zoom. And so what I want you to do is, if you're interested in being part of this, right below this video, my email is going to be there. And I want you to send me an email. But here's the deal. Don't send me an email just to send me an email. Pray. Ask the Lord, do you really want to do this? Do you want to commit to this? And if you want to commit to this, I want to encourage you to send me an email. We'll get you set up and we'll begin walking through this together. And here's the deal. We're only going to do this every other week. And we're going to do it as long as it takes for us to get through the curriculum that we teach. And so we're going to teach our DNA, and then we're going to teach the practices to multiplying the cell so that we can take advantage of this opportunity God has given us in scattering, and more people listening and connecting to our cells as they're scattered now, that we can take advantage of that and disciple those people into faith in Christ and the covenant fellowship with the Lord through his church and connecting to the universal church on the mission of discipling the nations. So my email address is going to be down there. Hit me up if you want to be part of that. And we're going to train every disciple to be a church planter. Hope you have a great day. God bless, and keep asking those awesome questions on what the Lord is doing in this time and how we can join him in building his church. Grace and peace to you. Take care.